General Chaturvedi, General Kohli, General Bhadoria, distinguished fellow veterans, distinguished professors of the JNU, students, ladies, gentlemen. आज मुझे यहाँ आपके सामने आके अत्यंत गौरव है और खुशी है. प्रथम इसलिए because I am myself a JNU graduate, the class of 1980, though I am from the National Defence Academy, and I proudly have the BSc degree that was given to me from the NDA in 1980, and I've come back many times. कई बारी वापस आए हैं JNU in various capacities, and it's extremely gratifying for a student to be here on this podium. I would also like to thank the सीमा जागरण मंच at the outset कि उन्होंने मुझे आमंत्रित किया and has given me the honor of speaking on such an important topic. Now जो maritime security है, it is a very vast subject. जो मेरे को 40-45 मिनट मिले हैं, I will not be able to cover the entire. So I have covered certain important portions जो मकसद था इस lecture का for awareness, उसके sort of viewpoint से, and I will try and keep it interesting and try and keep you engaged while this goes on. ये जो मैप मैंने लगाया है, कई लोग सोच रहे होंगे कि उल्टा है, बट ये मैं इसीलिए दिखाना चाहता था. ये हम स्टाफ कॉलेज में भी दिखाते हैं कि इफ़ यू लुक एट इट फ्रॉम सीमेंस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, जब आप समुद्र की तरफ से देखो तो भारत का व्यू जो व्यू पॉइंट है वो इस तरह से लगता है. नॉर्मली वी आर ऑल यूज्ड टू लुकिंग एट इट फ्रॉम द टॉप डाउन, बट दुनिया गोल है, एंड दिस इज़ अनदर वे ऑफ लुकिंग एट इट, एंड द नेवी टेंड्स टू लुक एट इट इन दिस मैनर. नाउ जैसे मैंने बोला, काफ़ी वास्ट टॉपिक है, तो मैंने इसको इन 7 पार्ट्स में डिवाइड किया है. करीबन 7-8 मिनट ईच में मैं स्पेंड करूँगा इसके ऊपर. थोड़ी सी इंट्रोडक्शन के बाद जो इंडियन ओशन के यूनिक कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स हैं, more importantly our ancient maritime past, particularly for the younger generation. I think but most people are not aware of our deep connection to the seas. Usko in brief I will tell, though it is a history of more than 3,000 years, but in 5 or 6 minutes जितना कवर कर सकते हैं. फिर जो हमारे maritime interests हैं which are important for India's prosperity, वो कवर करूँगा. I will cover the challenges, and then I'll come to the Indian Navy briefly कि हमारे roles क्या हैं, missions क्या हैं, how does it discharge its responsibility, little bit about the Coast Guard, and finally I think the conclusion and recommendations where we can do some discussion. So this will be the structure. Now आपको सबको मालूम है, but we tend to forget it, even I tend to forget it at times, कि this is the only ocean in the world that is named after a country and a civilization. और कोई भी देश को इस ऐसा गौरव नहीं है कि एक पूरा ओशन उसके अगेंस्ट नेम हो. एंड देयर हैव बीन मेनी अटेम्प्ट्स इन द रीसेंट पास्ट 40-50 years. ये इंडिया ने नहीं नाम दिया था, दैट इज़ मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट. दिस नेम वॉज गिवन बाय द यूरोपियंस एक्चुअली when they came to the Indian Ocean, because they realized correctly that, जैसे जनरल भदौरिया ने बताया, that India dominates the Indian Ocean, and therefore this ocean was named after India, and this is something we should be very proud of. And there have been many attempts in the past to remove this name by other countries in the region, but I think it is too deep ingrained in the world psyche to be changed, and then there is no consensus on an alternate name as well. ये दुनिया का तीसरा बड़ा महासागर है. 20% of the globe is occupied by the Indian Ocean. It has a huge vast living and non-living resources. This is very rich in marine life, more so even than the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean जो इससे बड़े हैं, because of the peculiar nature of this ocean. वो है कि ये walled है. Northern side में जैसे मैंने आपको दिखाया, it is walled by the landmass of India, and on the western side by Africa, and on the eastern side by Southeast Asia. तो ये पूरा walled ocean है. साउथ में is Antarctica of course, and then there are connections of course to the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, but that is through the Southern Ocean जिसको बोलते हैं. This unique geography जो है, this sustains the life in South Asia. जो monsoon है, it thrives and comes. जो बारिश आती है हमारे पास, it only comes because of the shape of this ocean. There is no other similar phenomenon anywhere else in the world. और कहीं ऐसा phenomenon नहीं है कि जो monsoon का season आता है वो सिर्फ यहाँ आता है, and that is because of the peculiar geographical nature of the Indian Ocean. Now again, most important from security point of view are that access to the Indian Ocean is only possible through 7 choke points. ये मैंने यहाँ दिखाए हैं जो 7 choke points हैं: Suez Canal, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, Mozambique Channel, the Cape of Good Hope, the Malacca Strait, Sunda Strait, Lombok Strait and Ombai Better Strait. ये जो हैं straits जो हैं, सिर्फ इनके थ्रू ही any ship can pass if it has to go from the east to the west. And therefore, this was recognized most importantly by the British, that time by Lord Curzon. And he said 7 keys control the Indian Ocean. And he says Great Britain has to control the 7 keys. तो उन्होंने जो 7 चाबियाँ थी इंडियन ओशन की, उसके ऊपर उन्होंने अपना कब्जा किया. Starting off from the Suez Canal to एडन उनका बेस था इन द स्ट्रेट ऑफ एल मंडेब. स्ट्रेट ऑफ हॉर्मूज में ओमान एंड द एंटायर मिडल ईस्ट. मोज़म्बिक चैनल एंड केप ऑफ गुड होप में साउथ अफ्रीका उनके साथ था. ऑस्ट्रेलिया was their colony, Singapore was their colony, so was Malaysia, Indonesia of course was with the Dutch, but essentially they controlled the access to the Indian Ocean by holding these keys. And this is very important, ये किसी भी और ocean में ये phenomenon नहीं है. And therefore these choke points are very important and very vulnerable from a security point of view. And जैसे आप देखेंगे from the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and Malacca Strait, जो 3 point हैं, इसमें more than 80% of the world shipping has to pass. ईस्ट से वेस्ट जाने के लिए या इंडिया की तरफ आने के लिए या इस रीजन में आने के लिए they have to pass this. The traffic south of the Good Hope is not that much, काफ़ी है पर इतना ज़्यादा नहीं है क्योंकि बहुत लंबा पड़ जाता है ships के लिए, it is costly. The traffic south of Australia is also not feasible because the sea is very rough. So perforce, because of reasons of economy and ease of navigation, this sea can be controlled if you have control over these choke points, but that is easier said than done. मतलब लगता है कि जैसे चाबी है पर इतना आसान नहीं है इसको कंट्रोल करना. नॉट सरप्राइजिंगली जो इंडियन ओशन है इसमें ग्रेट पावर कॉन्टेस्ट आज भी चल रहा है, हमेशा से था. आज भी 120 शिप्स एंड सबमरीन्स ऑन एन एवरेज फ्रॉम डिफरेंट कंट्रीज, उनके जो मैंने आपको झंडे दिखाए हुए हैं, they are present here. The reason for this presence is firstly oil from the Middle East, जो उनको oil secure करना है. Also resources from East Africa and Africa are becoming more important. China की जो नज़र है वो firmly Africa के ऊपर है. And also the fact that there is piracy in the area, जो Gulf of Aden है, south of Yemen and north of Somalia, वहाँ जो piracy है उसके लिए काफ़ी नेवीज़ ने अपने जहाज़ तैनात कर रखे हैं. सो देयर इज़ ऑलवेज बीन दिस प्रेजेंस इन द इंडियन ओशन एंड इट इज़ टुडे ऑल्सो, एंड अ नंबर ऑफ कंट्रीज ऑल्सो ऑपरेट देयर सबमरीन्स, न्यूक्लियर सबमरीन्स आउट हियर. नाउ कमिंग टू द इंडियाज़ एंशिएंट मैरिटाइम पास्ट, लॉर्ड वर्ना तो आप सब जानते हैं, जो द लॉर्ड ऑफ द ओशंस एज पर आर mythology, and his consort, that is one of the most ancient statues that I have shown here. And not surprisingly जो इंडियन नौसेना की जो क्रेस्ट है, कईयों को शायद मालूम ना होगा, जो मोटो है हमारा वो है शाह नो वरुण, that means with the blessings of Lord Varun. So this crest, the motto, ये हमें दिया था श्री राजागोपालाचारी ने, our first Governor General and of India. When he took over from Mountbatten, he was the one who suggested to the then British Chief of Naval Staff that this should be our motto, and was adopted. तो जो वरुण है उनका नाम जो है नेवी की क्रेस्ट में है since that time, since 1947. Now I want to, apart from our connection, India's connection with the seas, I want to show you this slide. It is slightly complicated, but ये बताने के लिए कि हम सब की origin जो है, मेरी आपकी, all humanity has come from the seas. This is scientifically proven. 700 million years ago ये branch हुए थे, the branch from which we are created and from which all the other animals are created. But life began in the seas. हमारा जो planet है वो watery planet है, 72% is water, and without water, इस पानी के बिना, क्योंकि और किसी planet में अभी तक हमको इस तरह का पानी नहीं मिला है, that is why there is no life as yet, and we are still desperately finding or looking for life, because as an aside, मतलब not to sort of make you scared or something, because we will not be around, but after another 35 to 40 billion years, the earth will finish. That is the current scientific prediction, because the solar system will die, because the sun will collapse, and we will crash into the Milky Way, and new stars will be born. So बहुत time hai as per the prediction, scientific prediction, but the fact is that we have all originated from the seas. जो percentage of planet पानी हमारे planet के ऊपर है, उससे थोड़ा सा कम हमारी body में भी है. On the planet is about 70%, about 65% of the human body हम सब पानी के हैं. And if you look at the amount of salt in our blood, there is a correlation to the amount of salt in the oceans as well. So there is a very close linkage between us and the oceans from our origins millions of years ago. अगर हम अपने पुराने पास्ट को देखें तो विष्णु पुराण में भी आपने सब ने सागर मंथन की गाथा सुनी होगी, which is shown in this picture. So right from the time सृष्टि के beginning से the importance of the oceans to India is borne out by our old scriptures and our own ancient text as well. And यहाँ Vishnu ji is supporting Mount Meru and with Lakshmi on top, and Suras and Asuras are doing the churning to get the Amrita out. So this is an ancient sort of myth or belief, or in the Puranas, which bears out our close connection with the seas. Similarly, जो विष्णु के 10 अवतार हैं, उसमें पहले 2 अवतार जो हैं वो water related हैं. Matsya avatar is the fish avatar, Kurma avatar is the tortoise avatar, and so on. And in fact, कई लोग बिलीव करते हैं कि जो 10 अवतार हैं ये एवोल्यूशन ऑफ ह्यूमन बीइंग्स के साथ, डार्विन की थ्योरी के साथ भी कनेक्टेड हैं, क्योंकि जो 5वां अवतार है, दैट इज़ अ डॉर्फ अवतार, दैट इज़ द स्मॉलेस्ट ह्यूमन बीइंग, जो उनको स्केलेटन मिली है फर्स्ट ह्यूमन बीइंग की, उसकी हाइट और इस अवतार की हाइट जो है दैट इज़ ऑलमोस्ट द सेम. सो इट इज़ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग दैट वी हैव वेरी एंशिएंट कनेक्शंस टू द सीज, एंड इट शोज़ द एवोल्यूशन ऑफ लाइफ. अगर हम एक्चुअल कॉन्क्रीट प्रूफ में जाएं जो हमारे पास है इन टर्म्स ऑफ फिजिकल एविडेंस, तो लोथल में जो ड्राई डॉक है जो गुजरात में है एज पार्ट ऑफ द इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन, दैट इज़ नोन एज द वर्ल्ड्स फर्स्ट डॉक. इट इज़ डेट्स बैक टू अबाउट 2350 BC, जो कार्बन डेटिंग उन्होंने की है. ये उसका पिक्टोरियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, और ये उसकी एक्चुअल साइट पिक्चर है, विद द डॉक ऑन द लेफ्ट, द रिवर बेड जो अभी सूख गया है, ऑन द राइट कभी पानी होता है कभी नहीं होता उसके अंदर. एंड दिस इज़ द करंट रिमेन्स, विच इज़ ऑफ कोर्स एन आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट एंड समथिंग विच आई वुड अर्ज यू टू विजिट. अगर आपको चांस मिले ज़रूर जाके विजिट कीजिए, बिकॉज दिस इज़ द वर्ल्ड्स फर्स्ट maritime connected dry dock. Now when we come to our ancient past, जैसे मैंने कहा कि 2-3 हज़ार की हिस्ट्री, सालों की हिस्ट्री हमको थोड़ी कंप्रेस करनी पड़ेगी. You find that both in North and Central India and in South India, up to almost the 14th century, our ancient kingdoms had very close connection with the seas. Starting off with the Mauryan Empire, उसकी मैं और डिटेल दूंगा. देन द गुप्ता, मराठा एम्पायर ऑफ कोर्स मैनी ईयर्स लेटर, एंड इन द साउथ was even closer because this naturally they were closer to the seas, and so they had more affinity. The Pandyas, the Cheras in Kerala, the Pandyas in eastern India, the Chola dynasty in south central India, the Satavahanas in Andhra Pradesh, the Pallavas in south near Madurai. All these had very close connections to the seas. And under the Mauryan Empire, as you are aware, India had developed trade routes and missionaries which were used to spread first Hinduism, then Buddhism, and later on even Islam traveled from India by sea to Southeast Asia. मैं इंडोनेशिया में 3 साल रह चुका हूँ as the defense attaché, and you have to see the temples of Prambanan, the temples of Borobudur, which are the Buddhist, first the Hindu temples, then the Buddhist temples, to see the kind of impact. अगर आप Cambodia जाएं, Angkor Wat, when you go to Korea, they have a very close connection. Ayodhya, as you know, when you go to Japan, they have a very close connection to Buddhism in India. So this was actually done by sea. It was very difficult to travel by road those days, and it was all done by sea with the routes shown there. वो coast के पास से जाते थे because they obviously could not venture into the open seas. And of course, the closest connection is the spread of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, which was done by Emperor Ashoka's daughter Sanghamitta. Now, Chola Empire जो था, that was even greater. अभी recently एक picture भी आई है Chola Empire के ऊपर. I would urge you to see that. It's a very good movie, very close to reality. But I was just recently in Madurai myself. I had gone on a tour. I went to the Meenakshi temple, which was both Chola and Pandya empires, both of them. But to see the kind of sophistication in sculpture, in art, you can only imagine the kind of sophistication in the maritime side. And they were the people who actually colonized Indonesia and Southeast Asia. तो उन्होंने establish किया था, that was part of their kingdom, and it was part of their influence for many centuries, which remains even today. Similarly, there is another very famous manuscript called the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. पहले जो Greek time में Indian Ocean जो Arabian Sea था उसको Erythraean Sea बोलते थे. That was the name given. This is from the first century, that is Common Era, first CE का जो है. इसमें उन्होंने इन डिटेल दिए थे कि कौन से ट्रेडिंग पोर्ट्स हैं. ये जो मैप है उस टाइप का नहीं था उसमें. दिस इज़ अ मॉडर्न मैप, एंड द मैप दैट टाइम वाज मच मोर क्रूड, बट ये सारी जगहें उन्होंने नेम की हैं. एंड एज वाज मेंशन्ड बाय जनरल भदौरिया, आई वाज सीएनसी साउथ, and I took a lot of interest in the maritime marine archaeology there. And recently they have discovered a whole lot of Roman seals and coins and jugs there from their harbors in Muziris and nearby, क्योंकि वो trade के सारे evidence अभी मिल रहे हैं. So you can see how busy we were on the maritime side in those days. But this declined. Now decline क्यों हुआ? Because after the Gupta Empire fell in the 5th century, the Hunas arrived from Mongolia, from Central Asia. Thereafter, of course, the invasions from the northeast started from the 7th to 8th century, and in the 14th century the Mughal Empire was established. Now it is not that the Mughals and Mongols did not want to have a maritime, that they were not of that bent of mind. वो Central Asia के थे, वो घुड़सवार थे, they were used to land battles, they had no concept of seas. So I don't blame them, but the fact is, because they dominated the society, the seas died out, and they unfortunately did not realize the importance of the seas. South में फिर भी थोड़ी देर चलता रहा until the Pandya and Chola kingdoms, but South की जो kingdoms थी, they fought against each other. They were bitterly divided at that time, and so by the 14th century, the Chola kingdom and the Pandyas declined. They fell apart. छोटे छोटे kingdoms में बट गए, and to have maritime power you need money. Maritime power is expensive, it is not cheap, and therefore the maritime power declined. It led to a vacuum of maritime power. Only the Marathas, that is under Shivaji, his admiral Kanoji Angre, and the Cheras, the Marakars जो थे केरला में, they continued their tradition, but they did not really have an extensive navy. It was no match for the European navies, क्योंकि यूरोप में उस तब तक the age of enlightenment had happened, the technological revolution had started, so advancements had come in the guns, in the ships. तो जो हमारे जहाज़ थे और हमारी guns थी, they were of no match. And therefore in 1498, when Vasco da Gama, this is a pictorial description, arrived in Calicut, there was very little resistance to his arrival. He was welcomed, and because the Rajas at that time thought they will make money out of this, and therefore the spice trade was gradually taken over by the Portuguese. Sardar K.M. Panikkar, who is actually a Malayali, उनका नाम सरदार के एम पानेकर है. He's a Malayali. His book India and the Indian Ocean is something which I would urge everybody to read. It's an essay. It's not a book. It is now a World Heritage book, where he wrote his most famous line there is that he said, despite countless invasions from a northeast border over centuries, India never lost her independence. क्योंकि जो invaders आते थे by land, they would invade, they would get assimilated into the fabric of India. They became Indian. They never remained foreign. But we lost our independence only when we lost command of the sea in the first decade of the 16th century. जो colonial powers, जैसे मैंने बताया, Portuguese came in 1498, उसके बाद Dutch and British arrived almost together in 1600 and 1602, and finally the French in 1674. Then they struggled against each other. In that struggle, Great Britain prevailed, which resulted in our being a British colony till 1947. So this is the story of our maritime past. Our revival began in 1947, the maritime revival. But we should not forget that we have a glorious maritime past. We have a glorious maritime tradition and heritage. And yes, we suffered a decline because decline हर एक civilization में होता है. But this is the time that we have to come back up. Now coming to the next section कि हमारे maritime interests हैं क्या? Now Jawaharlal Nehru had very famously said that we cannot afford to be weak at sea. History has shown that whatever power controls Indian Ocean has, in the first instance, India's seaborne trade at her mercy, and in the second, India's very independence itself. And our current Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, has also been very keen on the maritime, expansion and enhancement of India. And he also underlines that we are the inheritors of a glorious maritime heritage. And it is the endeavor of our government to restore India's position of eminence in the global maritime sector. Now, the first interest that we have, because क्योंकि we are land-based people, तो हम border के बारे में सोचते हैं. Seema Jagran Manch also, the issue is with border. But as far as the navies are concerned, border is only the start point. The seashore is only the start point. We look much beyond our borders. So जो पहला interest हमारा is to defend our coastline. 7,500 से ज़्यादा coastline है. करीबन 1300 islands हैं इंडिया की. हमारा जो exclusive economic zone है वो currently 2.3 million square kilometers है. It is 2/3 of India's land mass. और अभी जब ये expand होगा, because अभी continental shelf, वो if somebody wants an explanation I can give it later. When that is delineated, our sea area will become equal to our land mass. So we have as much area at sea to exploit economically as we have on land. And you can see the advantage given by the Lakshadweep islands, the additional area that we get out here. And of course the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the amount of sea area that we get is phenomenal. We have also 12 major ports, 200 non-major ports. These are vital assets. They need to be defended because Sangharsh ke time mein, these are the ports that will be attacked, that will be blockaded by mines by the enemy, particularly the important ports, particularly जो Pakistan border के पास हैं, in the Gulf of Kutch and in the Gulf of Cambay, दोनों जो हैं इसके अंदर particularly vulnerable हैं. जैसे जनरल बदूर ने बताया था, this is one of the busiest sea areas in the world. और ये जो सफ़ेद लाइनें हैं, ये sea routes हैं, which are followed by ships. These are the actual sea routes, because these are the shortest distances. जो merchant ship है वो सबसे कम distance travel करेंगे क्योंकि उनकी fuel के पैसे बचाने होते हैं, profit का बात होती है. So these are the delineated sea lanes. और आप देखेंगे कि सब इंडिया जो पेनिनसुला है उसके कितने पास से निकलती हैं, and how strategic is our location. That means we can intercept these sea lanes and we also need to defend them. So it carries a phenomenal amount of cargo. It is vital to the health of the global economy. तो जो Indian Navy और India का role है, it is not just to defend the prosperity of India. That is first, of course. But it is also to be a larger force for good in this world and defend this area so that it remains open for navigation and freedom for every country in the world which is law abiding. ये एनर्जी ट्रेड जो है कमिंग आउट पर्टिकुलरली फ्रॉम द पर्शियन गल्फ, आप देखेंगे दैट इज़ अ मेजर सोर्स ऑफ ऑयल. Millions and millions of tons per annum 66 to 70% of the world's oil comes out from here and all passes through the Indian Ocean region. These are the oil arteries, as we call them. जो हमारी एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी अगर हम देखें कि ऑयल एंड नेचुरल गैस जो है वो हमारा जो टोटल एनर्जी कंजम्पशन है इंडिया का उसका 29% है, ऑलमोस्ट शॉर्ट ऑफ 1/3. कोल जो है वो 46% है. दोनों को आप मिलाएंगे तो इट कम्स टू almost 75%. So now you see that this is, and a lot of coal is also imported, जैसे मैंने दिखाया है. Because if you see on the right hand side, last year we imported crude oil worth $119 billion, natural gas worth $12 billion, and coal worth $28 billion. So this is the kind of energy dependence we have on the seas. अभी हर एक चीज़ जो है, चाहे आप पहाड़ी गांव में चले जाएं, उनका केरोसिन जलेगा या उनकी गैस का सिलेंडर होगा, that comes from the sea. It comes over the sea. The linkage is right there to your stomach, to our kitchens, is through the seas. जो prediction है गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का, that 5% will be the demand, increase in demand of crude, and by 2040 जो अभी हमारी requirement है oil की, it will triple, because our population is growing, our economy is growing, our energy consumption is much lesser per capita than other developed countries, and therefore you'll see that this entire cost of import will grow. 85% of India's crude oil needs to be imported by sea. बाकी जो 15% domestic production अभी है जो घट रही है because we have not found new reserves, उसमें से 11% is from offshore fields, from the sea. Only about 4% today is from land-based oil wells. Now also we are not just importing crude oil, we are also exporting petroleum products. That is a very good thing that has happened, particularly starting off with the Reliance refineries, particularly in Gujarat. And today we export refined products worth $42 billion. So it is not just that, so we are importing crude, we are refining them in our refineries and we are exporting them. And today, as you might have read in the papers, even the Western countries are taking oil refined by us, which we buy cheap from Russia, and we are supplying to them. Also, we are earning foreign exchange. So it's a very complicated and complex phenomenon. But the fact is that this will remain a very, very important security interest for us, a maritime interest for us. For the foreseeable future, Government of India has put in a lot of effort to shift to renewable energy, to green energy, which will grow. We are projected to grow to as per the Government of India to be net carbon zero by 2060. But साथ साथ जो है oil requirement will also grow. As far as our trade is concerned, आपको पता है कि we are the 5th largest economy, we are the fastest growing major economy in the world, and we are likely to be the 3rd largest economy by 2027 when we overtake Japan and Germany. उसके बाद थोड़ा मुश्किल है. To overtake China and USA is very, very difficult. It will take a very long time unless we grow at some phenomenal rate of 14 to 15% per year. But as per the Times of India budget edition जो paper था उसमें very interesting statistic that if we continue to grow at the current rate of 7 to 8%, it will take us 650 years to overtake China in terms of economy. So we, of course, that's based on a lot of predictions, but the fact is that we need to grow much faster. We need to grow much faster than what we are growing today. We need to come back to the growth trajectory of at least 11 to 12%, which we had for some time in the past. Total imports and 759 billion, उसमें से जैसे बताया 119 billion is oil and gas. Exports 650 billion. With merchandise exports जो bulk exports हैं 419 billion. But more importantly हमारा जो GDP में trade का जो ratio है, GDP trade GDP ratio of 45.3% is the 2nd highest in the world after South Africa. That means our economy depends, 45% of our economy plus depends on trade. And that is why it is so important, the seas are so important for us if we want to prosper and we want to grow. We have a modest merchant marine, not a very big merchant marine. We are the 17th largest in the world. This is something we need to pay attention to. But more importantly, 1 in 10 merchant mariner in the world is an Indian citizen. So our mariners are the third largest merchant mariners in the world after China and the Philippines. We have a substantial and growing overseas interest. We have overseas oil fields, we have overseas factories, we have overseas manufacturing facilities which are growing. We have investments, we have service sector investments across the globe, all of which sooner or later will require some kind of maritime protection in times of need, as it keep happening. We also have deep sea mining and Arctic and Antarctic research stations. We have two research stations on the Antarctic, Maitri, which was opened in '89, and Bharti, which was opened in 2013. And we also have one research station, Himadri, in the Arctic region on Spitsbergen Island, Norway mein. And we have got observer status in the Arctic Council. Now, both the Arctic and the Antarctic is very important, particularly from the point of view of climate. So there's a lot of research going on the impact of climate change, because जो Arctic और Antarctic हैं वो हमारी धरती के रेफ्रिजरेटर हैं, और रेफ्रिजरेटर के बिना खाना खराब हो जाता है. So if those refrigerators become warm, अगर उनका cooling ख़त्म हो जाएगा, this earth will finish as we know it to be. The life will finish as we know it to be. So it's very important to keep these two refrigerators of the world going. We also have an area allocated to India by the International Seabed Authority, by the United Nations. This was allocated many years back in 1975. There are a lot of polymetallic nodules. Small example है, जैसे आपका cobalt जो है आजकल very important for mobile phones, for car batteries, etc. etc. ये सारे जो rare minerals हैं, they are very scarce on land today and only monopolized by a few countries. But there is a lot of them which are present under the sea. But उसको निकालने के लिए technology चाहिए, उसको निकालने के लिए you need a way to do it. And this is something that India has been lagging behind for many years. 75 से हमको ये मिला हुआ है. It has lapsed also, but we have not been able to do anything. China has invested very heavily in this field, and today China is the leading nation in undersea water exploration. We have the largest diaspora in the world today, spread across 207 countries and regions, numbering 32 million or 3.2 crores, increasing by 2.5 lakhs annually. And this increase is going to go on at least till 2045. So you can see the size of the Indian diaspora abroad. The remittances to India are $100 billion per year. And इसी के कारण जो हमारा balance of payment होता है, that is, उसका संतुलन बनाए हुए है NRI Indians ने, because of the money that they remit from abroad. So it's a very, very important component of our economy. And very often NRIs need help, जैसे मैं दिखाऊंगा. Very often the Navy has to come in, sometimes the Air Force have had to come in to rescue them from various situations. Blue economy का जिक्र किया था जनरल भदौरिया ने. Now blue economy has got many facets. This is India's opportunity actually for economic development. It involves harnessing the vast oceanic resources, but sustainably. मतलब the blue economy demands that जो हम समुद्र से लें वो revive होके फिर से आए. Because if you just pluck it out of the ocean, ये बहुत sensitive environment है, like any natural environment. अगर हम indiscriminately उसको exploit करेंगे तो आप एक दो बारी यूज़ करने के बाद वो ख़त्म हो जाएगा, as it has happened in many places in the world. So it contributes currently to 4% of India's GDP. Estimate is that it can go up to almost 50% of our GDP if we exploit it properly. Ocean-based trade, I've said, energy supplies, this will quadruple. Our food production is slowly being farmed from the seas. ये और बढ़ेगा. Energy production धीरे धीरे बढ़ रहा है. In some countries like UK and Denmark and Holland, already almost 20% of their energy is coming from the seas. It is clean energy. It does not pollute. It does not cause any obstruction. 80% of the world's population lives within 200 kilometers of the coast. That is the kind of affinity we have to the seas. And global population requires more water, it requires more energy, it requires more food, and the final frontier available is only the oceans. We have only exploited a part of our fishing that is available. We need to do much more. Other countries have been exploiting it in the past. Of course, now we don't allow that, but we still haven't exploited a full opportunity. So you will see that a lot of areas of blue economy are there. This is a new sector of our economy. It is developing very slowly, but there is a lot of impetus from the government side also towards this, and this is something that we need to push to increase our prosperity and bring up the quality of life for our people. Now coming to the third section, that what are the challenges to our maritime security? Now I will cover them under this. Non-conventional threat means एक तो conventional है जैसे चाइना हो गया या पाकिस्तान हो गया या some other state adversary हो गया, but non-conventional is when it is not from a particular state. Non-traditional threats which are not related to state or non-state actors, I will give you the details, and of course environment related threats, we will discuss them, and then I'll go into some more detail in the threats against Pakistan, China, and the combination of Pakistan and China should that ever happen. So coming to non-traditional and non-conventional threats, non-conventional threats, terrorism hai, piracy hai, drug smuggling hai, people trafficking hai, gun running hai, natural disasters hai. Now these, the seas are, by tradition, have freedom of navigation, except in the territorial waters of a state. जो 12 मील का distance है from the country's coastline, that is your territory. Beyond that, even in your exclusive economic zone, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which we have signed on to, allows full freedom of navigation as long as you are following the laws of the United Nations Convention. So these seas have traditionally been free and unfettered. Unlike land borders, you can move. So jo navies hai, the minute you sail out, within about half an hour you are in international waters. So you are always 99% of the time you are in international waters. You are never operating in your own waters. So that's why your outlook changes, because you are in an international domain where anybody can be there. Enemy submarine can be there. He has got full right to be there. Enemy warship can be there. He has a right to be there under the United Nations Convention. So this is a peculiar phenomenon of the sea, and so can we be. We can be in the other in the other countries' exclusive zone as long as we are following the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. There is piracy in the Gulf of Aden particularly, which has come under control now. ये piracy जो थी, this was, इसके causes we can discuss separately. What are the causes and how it has been brought under control. Drug smuggling इतनी हो रही है अभी, particularly after the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan and the unrest in Pakistan. Last year, the Indian Navy, Coast Guard and all the other agencies, they captured or apprehended about $3 billion worth of drugs. And it is estimated that we only catch about 5 to 10% of all the trafficked drugs. So you can imagine the kind of trafficking of drugs that is happening, all emanating from the Golden Crescent and the Golden Triangle, Myanmar ki side mein, both sides of India, and going across the world, and of course a lot of it coming into India as well, which is a huge problem for our country. People trafficking, Rohingyas are the latest example, but there are people from India being trafficked to other countries. There are a lot of natural disasters that happen here. 70% of the world's natural disasters take place in the Indian Ocean because of the kind of geography that this place has. All these are threats to our maritime security, which require to be countered. Non-traditional threats, there are many more, but मैंने जो maritime related हैं वही लिखी हैं. Food security, health security. अभी we had the COVID-19 pandemic. The Navy was pressed into service to provide assistance to our neighboring countries. We carried vaccines for them. We carried medicines for them. We transported our people back from all these countries, from the Middle East, from Iran, from Maldives, from Sri Lanka, because all the methods of travel were shut. So there are requirements that come in because of health and health security issues. Energy security की मैंने आपसे already बात कर ली है. Financial and economic security, data security मैंने mention नहीं किया है. 99% of the data जो हम internet, all of us take it for granted today, जो हम internet के ऊपर social media वगैरह देखते हैं, 99% is under sea. The traffic, only 1% is through satellites because it is very expensive to send signals through satellite. So 99% of data goes through sea. illegal, unregulated fishing, which is there, IUU fishing जिसको बोलते हैं, is a big problem, growing problem. Latest estimates suggest that 60% of all fishing in the world is illegal today and needs to be combated because वो जो fishing है वो ecosystem को destroy कर रही है. And soon, if it goes on, particularly the way the Chinese fish, there will be very little fish, wild fish left in the world. We can probably only then farm them. Environment related threats, climate change जो है, that is causing a lot of problems. Oceanic pollution, you may have read that in the southern Indian Ocean and the southern Pacific Ocean and the southern Atlantic Ocean, because the circulation of oceans, 50 kilometer wide, 50 kilometers wide swaths of plastic garbage are floating. And they're being washed up in every place from Antarctic to remote islands. It is killing the birds, it is killing the animals who eat them by mistake. It is causing unprecedented harm to the environment, and this is a huge sort of problem. And as I mentioned, species extinction is happening at an alarming rate, and we need to be careful of it because the final species, if we continue like this, will be only the human being who will then also be extinct. Now, if we come to the conventional threat which is there, particularly against Pakistan, now Pakistan is close to bankruptcy, आपको मालूम है, but उसकी modernization efforts कम नहीं हुई हैं, and the reason for this is being bankrolled by China. So 72% of all arms procured by Pakistan are from China. मैंने थोड़े systems mention किए हैं यहाँ, it might be slightly confusing for others, but air defense systems, unmanned aerial vehicles, artillery systems for the army, Al-Khalid tanks, Yuan class AIP submarines, fast attack craft, 4 frigates, 6 latest 5th generation fighter aircraft, ये J-10 जो हैं, 50 4.5 generation aircraft जो jointly manufacture हो रहे हैं, air to air missiles वगैरह वगैरह, ये सब वहाँ से चाइना से आ रहे हैं. China is also having a collaboration with Pakistan in upgradation of the battle tanks, manufacture of advanced fighters and other technology including modernizing nuclear weapons, जो फिर पाकिस्तान जो है वो export भी कर रहा है थोड़ा बहुत अपनी साइड से jointly with China. So it is estimated that up to 25 जो arms ले रहे हैं, जो हथियार ले रहे हैं, वो they will cost $48.5 billion. अभी उनके जो foreign exchange reserves हैं, latest is about $1 billion. So you have to ask, where is this money coming from? And obviously it is being subsidized by China because China finds Pakistan is called a cat's paw. Cat's paw mean कि हमको distract करने के लिए उसने पाकिस्तान को तगड़ा करके रखा हुआ है artificially. So we get distracted on the west also and we are not able to devote our full energies to the northern border. ये उनकी पुरानी strategy रही है from the 1962 war onwards when they established the partnership with Pakistan. And therefore there is some quid pro quo that Pakistan will also have to give, and that quid pro quo would be in support against India, of course. Therefore, despite the fact that Pakistan हमारे मुकाबले में बहुत कमज़ोर है, particularly I am talking only on the maritime side, I am not dwelling on the army and the air force because that's not my subject, but it is of considerable nuisance value because it is being supported by China. So therefore you can't ignore it, you have to prepare plans, you have to have a contingency that side, even though you know that it can be defeated in war, but it will be supported by China. Now when we come to China, ये हमारी primary threat है, there is no doubt about it. It is a primary threat and long-term opponent. China looks at us as a nation rival because China का aim is to become the global superpower by 2049 and it looks to cut down India to size. So you will find जब भी opportunity मिलती है China को किसी international forum में या कहीं भी, it will look to block India's advances. जो हमारा border है, unresolved border along the line of actual control that gives them a good opportunity. This is the only unresolved land border apart from a slight land border issue with Bhutan that China has today. उसने बाकी सब से settle कर लिया है. Apart from the sea, Taiwan वगैरह issue अगर आप छोड़ें, तो land borders में this is the only major outstanding issue and it provides an opportunity for China to keep needling India. जैसे आपने देखा है recently डोकलाम में, गलवान में जो incident हुए हैं, थोड़े छोटे मोटे इंसिडेंट अरुणाचल में भी हुए हैं. जो उन्होंने इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अपना बिल्डअप किया है along the line of actual control, it has raised the threat level. क्योंकि जो उनके ट्रुप्स हैं वो परमानेंटली डिप्लॉयड हैं. इट इज़ नॉट लाइक पहले उनको दूर से आना पड़ता था. एंड दो वी हैव सर्टन एडवांटेजेस बट दे आर फॉरवर्ड बेस्ड एंड वी हैव हैड टू डिप्लॉय कंसिडरेबल अमाउंट ऑफ ट्रूप्स इन आवर नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स. सो नाउ अगर आप मैरीटाइम डोमेन में देखें तो हमारा जो फोर्स लेवल इम्बैलेंस है विद चाइना, दैट इज़ इंक्रीजिंग बिकॉज आवर अटेंशन इज रिवेटेड टू द कॉन्टिनेंटल साइड. सो वी आर अनएबल टू डिवोट that much time and resources to the maritime side. But this is the unseen thing that is happening, that the maritime imbalance is increasing. I will show you the figures in subsequent slides, but we need to be aware that this balance now, जब भी दुनिया में recent times में या पहले भी जब भी लड़ाई हुई है, it is always when there is a force imbalance. अगर कोई ज़्यादा strong हो जाए और opponent ज़्यादा weak हो जाए तो फिर strong सोचता है कि अभी मौका है इसको down करने के लिए. And the nuclear umbrella is there of course, but that affords, as we have seen, nuclear umbrella के नीचे भी आज की लड़ाइयाँ चल रही हैं. And India's security has been therefore vastly complicated क्योंकि चाइना की जो presence है Indian Ocean region में वो मैं दिखाऊंगा, it has grown substantially. उसके अभी सबसे largest maritime force है दुनिया का. It's the world largest maritime force, even compared to the United States. And as per the United States Congressional Research Service, they take out a 6-monthly report on the PLA Navy. Their warships will increase to 440 blue water मतलब जो बड़े जहाज़ हैं, छोटे जहाज़ करीबन 350 और हैं जो मैं इसमें नहीं गिन रहा हूँ, जो अपनी कोस्टल साइड की सिक्योरिटी के लिए. They have deployed 3 ships to the Indian Ocean region since 2008. जब से एंटी पायरेसी हुई तो उनको मौका मिल गया, बहाना मिल गया. So 3 ships have been deployed. उन्होंने अपना पहले बोलते थे हम कभी ओवरसीज़ मिलिट्री बेस खोलेंगे नहीं. दे ओपन द फर्स्ट मिलिट्री बेस इन जिबूती इन 2017. दे हैव स्टार्टेड डिप्लॉइंग देयर कन्वेंशनल एंड न्यूक्लियर सबमरीन्स इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन एंड वी एक्सपेक्ट दैट बाय 2030 दे विल डिप्लॉय देयर कैरियर टास्क फोर्स एंड द न्यूक्लियर सबमरीन ऑन परमानेंट पेट्रोल बाय 2030. They also have regular presence of the oceanographic research ships and satellite monitoring ships in the Indian Ocean region. ये हमेशा रहते हैं, कई बारी न्यूज़पेपर में भी आ चुका है. फिशिंग ट्रॉलर्स की बात की थी जनरल भदौरिया ने इन इंट्रोडक्टरी रिमार्क्स. वी ट्रैक दीज ट्रॉलर्स. 200 to 250 आर प्रेजेंट ईयर राउंड इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन. दे आर सपोर्टेड बाय रीसप्लाई शिप्स, मतलब उनको वापस जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ती. रीसप्लाई शिप्स आती हैं, 3 महीने के बाद उनका क्रू बदल जाता है, उनको खाना दे देते हैं, उनका पेट्रोल भर देते हैं, नया क्रू आ जाता है. दे स्टे देयर परमानेंटली अंटिल दे हैव टू गो बैक फॉर रिपेयर. साथ में फैक्ट्री शिप्स हैं जो मच्छी पकड़ते हैं, वो सीधी फैक्ट्री शिप में ट्रांसफ़र होती है. फैक्ट्री शिप उनको प्रोसेस करके, उनको कैन करके, उनको रीसप्लाई शिप से वापस भेज देते हैं. सो दिस इज़ अ कंटिन्यूस ऑपरेशन हैपनिंग एट सी. दे आर सकिंग आउट ऑल द रिसोर्सेज फ्रॉम द हाई सीज एंड लीगली there is nothing you can do about it because it is beyond our exclusive economic zone or any other country's exclusive economic zone. Therefore, we see that future war with China in the maritime front will also be active. If they deploy a substantial maritime force in the Indian Ocean region, including 2 carrier task forces and nuclear submarines, their naval base already houses a marine brigade. It is also capable now of basing aircraft carriers, submarines and helicopters. It is planning more bases in Gwadar in Pakistan, in East Africa, from where it could operate aircraft as well. They have got the second largest number of satellites in the world today, and their surveillance over the Indian Ocean, as per our intelligence estimates, is continuous. So they have a full knowledge of the deployment of Indian naval ships in the Indian Ocean region as well. They also have got land-based ballistic missiles which can be fired from the mainland into the Bay of Bengal. Not entire Indian Ocean, but up to about Sri Lanka. They have also, in their maritime strategy, been very smart. You would have heard of the Belt and Road Initiative. उसका जो maritime leg है, maritime silk route, it provides a rationale for the deployment of their ships in accordance with their latest maritime strategy, जिसको बोलते हैं offshore waters defense with open seas protection. 2015 की जो उनकी लेटेस्ट स्ट्रैटेजी है. एंड दिस इज़ द मैप, ऑफिशियल मैप पब्लिश्ड बाय चाइना ऑफ द बेल्ट एंड रोड इनिशिएटिव. जो रेड में है वो उनका लैंड बेस्ड कॉरिडोर है, जो ब्लू में है और लाइट ब्लू में है वो उनका सी बेस्ड कॉरिडोर है. सो बेसिकली दिस इज़ अ वेब ऑफ मैरीटाइम कनेक्टिविटी which will, establish ports, free trading zones, other infrastructure in other countries, and as along with the BRI, their rationale is that इसको protect करने के लिए हमारे forces को यहाँ होना है, which is principally the PLA Navy. So that is why they have given a rationale for this कि हम इसलिए deploy कर रहे हैं क्योंकि हमारे asset हैं, हमारी merchant ships हैं. As part of the BRI, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor आपने सुना होगा. This is the actual map of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which runs through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So China has succeeded in trampling over India's sovereignty by taking it through the territory claimed by India, which is rightfully India's as part of Jammu and Kashmir. And this is a $60 billion project. It is not running very well, of course. But उसका जो maritime side में connection है, जो ग्वादर देखेंगे आप, बलूचिस्तान में जो ग्वादर का area है, ये वाला. This is the finish point of this. So essentially, ग्वादर is supposed to be a commercial port. But मैंने अभी एक research paper लिखा है ग्वादर के ऊपर. There is no hope of ग्वादर being profitable because उसके आसपास जो है सारे जेबल अली है, ओमान के ports हैं, ईरान के ports हैं, established ports are there. So there is no hope of it ever being profitable. तो क्यों invest कर रहे हैं? It is from security point of view. So ये जो on the face of it, it is going to be a free trade zone and it is going to connect Central Asia and Afghanistan, etc., etc. But they are already connected by many other ports. So you can see that there is a security angle to this. They have already based troops under guise of security in Pakistan occupied Kashmir for security of the assets. वो already वहाँ based हैं पिछले 5-6 सालों से, which has come out in the media as well. And gradually we expect the जैसे bankrupt हो रहा है पाकिस्तान as a quid pro quo concession में वो, we expect them to give basing rights in Gwadar as well. Now last threat scenario is अगर दोनों के साथ इकट्ठा conflict हो. Now this of course is a win-win situation. चाइना और पाकिस्तान के लिए vis-a-vis India. जो CPEC है that is cemented this relationship क्योंकि जो पाकिस्तान military है वो बहुत corrupt है. They are all got business interests. About $30 to $40 billion of investment in the CPEC has gone to the Pakistan's Fauji companies, Army, Navy, Air Force combined. वो सारा उनका business interest है उसमें, सड़कें बनाने में, telecommunications में, harbor बनाने में. They are all giving the profits to the services and that profit is taken by the people. So, but it has given them also an opportunity to expand military infrastructure. जो arms ले रहे हैं उसकी payment भी इसके cover में हो रही है. This can be transformed for military use, and as I mentioned ये concessions लेंगे पाकिस्तान से, and therefore अगर हमारी कभी future में, that is our assessment, पाकिस्तान के साथ अगर झगड़ा होता है तो 72% commonality है weapons में. So China will definitely provide intelligence, satellite intelligence, it will definitely provide ammunition, it will definitely provide spares, and it will also posture along the northern borders कि हमारे जो land forces हैं they cannot move out entirely from there to the western front ताकि वो जो balance है पाकिस्तान के साथ वो ज़्यादा बिगड़े नहीं. तो they will keep our forces tied down. That is our estimate. On the contrary, अगर चाइना के साथ conflict होगा तो पाकिस्तान will provide them intelligence, human intelligence. Pakistan will provide them with distraction, and we feel that it will definitely fish in troubled waters क्योंकि उनका मकसद जो है वो कश्मीर है, and is definitely going to be some mischief done in Kashmir should we have a conflict with the northern border. जैसे मैंने कहा न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स हमारे पास हैं, बट जो डेटरेंट शील्ड न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स की है दैट इज़ फॉर अ हाई इंटेंसिटी वॉर, और चाइना हैज़ बीन वेरी क्लेवर टू कीप द वॉर टू अ लो इंटेंसिटी, सो हैज़ पाकिस्तान. तो बीनीथ द न्यूक्लियर अम्ब्रेला धीरे 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 थिंग्स कैन कीप हैपनिंग, एंड you cannot have a justification to expand to the nuclear level. So the nuclear weapons in a low intensity war do not really come into play except to maintain balance. कोई वो हमको नहीं threaten कर सकते हैं, हम उनको नहीं threaten कर सकते हैं, but that remains a balance. So this is the kind of threat scenarios that we face today. Now what have we done to strengthen India's maritime security? मैंने 1947 को जो कहानी छोड़ी थी, when we became independent we had 33 very small old ships. वो बेचारे काफ़ी घिसे पिटे जहाज थे because they were all ex-World War II. Today we have built it up, not entirely to the size that we wanted. We wanted to build it up to 200 ships and 500 aircraft. We have about 128. I'm not counting the small boats, which number another 80, 90, because they are not really of significance in offensive war. But ships that can be used for offensive operations, and about 209 aircraft we have. But more importantly, I want to bring out that we have been very keen and very focused on indigenization. अभी सब लोग बात करते हैं आत्मनिर्भर भारत की और मेक इन इंडिया की. I want to remind you, Indian Navy has been doing it since 1952, because we established the first design directorate, Naval Design Directorate was established in 1957. The DRDO was set up by the Indian Navy. Not many people are aware of it. हमने DRDO को set up किया था. The first DRDO lab, उनका नाम अभी भी same है, was the Naval Physical and Oceanographic Laboratory in 1952. जो NMRL है, sorry, 1953 में set up हुआ था, Naval Materials Research Laboratory. DRDO was established in 1958. उसके बाद एक और lab set up किया था 1969 में. So the Indian Navy has been the instrument in setting up the DRDO. We took over the defense shipyards for defense building in 1960, and the first Indian built ship, INS Ajay, was commissioned in Garden Reach Shipyard Engineers in 1961. On today, most warships, submarines, patrol boats, aircraft carriers are being built in India. Most of them, 95 to 98% of them. Today we have 43 indigenous warships under construction, and this is a significant contribution to the Indian economy. And I just want to bring out some facts about Vikrant, because I was overseeing the trials of Vikrant when I retired, and as first sea sortie I had sailed on Vikrant. We have achieved 76% indigenization. और लोग बोलते हैं कि 20,000 करोड़ का जहाज है, but you see where that 20,000 crores has gone. You know, that means 2/3 of that has been invested in India, in our people, in employment, in industries. And you see the material content, 44% जो है, that is something that we need to improve upon. So that's why I'm showing it, that it is not that we have really reached where we want to reach, but the fact is we have given almost 3,457 crores worth of material to Indian vendors, to various MSMEs, and the import component has been 4,373 crores. So that part is definitely there. 40,000 jobs were created during the construction, 2,000 workers employed daily, ancillary workforce of 12,000 individuals across the country. And they say that since each worker supports 3 to 5 people in his family, the positive effect of such employment is multiplied manifold. मैंने एक शख्स से बात की थी, he was from Madhya Pradesh and working as a welder. And when I spoke to him, he mentioned he's been working on the ship for the last 6 years and that his family is there. And he said, because of my work, my children are now today educated. I've got a house, I've got a pakka house. So you see the generation factor, employment factor is 36 to 50. What I'm highlighting here is that we need to support this, because ये लगता है कि डिफेंस फोर्सेस के ऊपर पैसा एक्सपेंडिचर, इट्स नॉट एक्सपेंडिचर. इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स द सेनेटर्स फाइट टू गेट द डिफेंस ऑर्डर फॉर देयर कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी, बिकॉज उनको मालूम है उनके जॉब्स होंगे, इनकी इंडस्ट्री डेवलप होगी. सो दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट. सो दिस इज सम मोर, आई विल स्किप थ्रू दैट सिंस टाइम इज अ बिट शॉर्ट. I will, the second last part, come to the roles and missions of the Indian Navy, which I will run through quickly. Basically, we have a doctrine which divides our missions into 4 military, diplomatic, constabulary and benign missions, and the structure is made to fulfill these roles and the various missions under each role. In the military role, of course, it's self-explanatory. जो मैंने लिखा is basically the war fighting role, the traditional role of navies, and this is something which we have already discussed vis-a-vis China and Pakistan. When we come to the diplomatic role, this is unique for the navies. Now, navies and diplomatic roles have been historically connected because ships are always in international waters. So we operate in other waters, we reach out to other navies, we meet them and see. Therefore, it has been a time-tested instrument to strengthen bilateral relations. We have exercises with more than 20 countries today. We portray a credible defense posture by our presence at sea, by visiting the ports. We basically aim to shape the maritime battlefield in peacetime, so that when war comes, आसपास के देश दोस्त हों, we get information, etc., etc. We need to reassure the Indian diaspora, and of course, peacekeeping roles are also there. Constabulary role जो है, that is a lower end of the military role. Coastal security, the Indian Navy is in charge of coastal security since 2611. That's a major role for the Navy today. We can discuss it. We ensure the security of the EZ along with the Coast Guard. Principally Coast Guard की responsibility, but Coast Guard doesn't have all the resources, so we support them. We also conduct anti-piracy patrol, जो good order at sea है, and anti-drug trafficking. मैंने आपको बताया था कि कितने drugs apprehend हुए हैं पिछले साल. And finally, the benign role, basically civil safety and security. We promote national soft power, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, aid to civil authorities. Hydrography is mapping of the oceans. The Navy is the only agency in the country which maps the oceans, and this is very important for all seafarers of the world. The only agency in India, of course there are other hydrographic agencies across the world. And of course search and rescue, we support the Coast Guard. Op Mother, jab tsunami hui thi, this is the kind of operation we had carried out in 2004. I was part of that operation. And we have rescued Indian diaspora, जो major evacuations हैं, from Lebanon in 2006, Libya in 2011, and Op Rahat, this time I was the Director General Naval Operations, where we rescued, including 12,091 foreign nationals, including almost 100 Pakistani citizens. And I must mention here, though time is short, that the person coordinating the effort in war-torn, जहाँ एडन में जहाँ बॉम्ब पड़ रहे थे, and I used to speak to her regularly on satellite phone, was an Indian Keralite principal of a school. सारे आदमी भाग गए. She was the only lady who stayed behind, volunteered to stay behind in that war to evacuate Indians from there. And we recognize her bravery, but I must tell you this, that this was a lady, and you know, I every time I used to speak to her, I used to ask her, "Aap theek ho?" She said, "Sir, don't worry, we are fine. आपके जहाज यहाँ हैं, कुछ हुआ तो हमको निकाल लेंगे." But she didn't leave, and until the last person came out, she did not leave. That is the kind of bravery she displayed. Briefly about the Coast Guard, आपको मालूम है, formed in 1977 from ships and personal taken from the Indian Navy. This is also a major force now, 75 major ships, इनके कई छोटे craft भी हैं. It has got 67 aircraft. It comes under the command of the Navy in wartime, and we work together very closely at sea. But we need to work much more closely together. Lastly, I would like to conclude with a few recommendations as well. I want to mention that, you know, this is something that we is a takeaway from this, that no country, you know, because India aspires to be a global power, but no country has become a global power without becoming a maritime power. Because your trade and the prosperity given by the seas feeds not just the economic prosperity, but also your armed forces. So if you see in the past 2 centuries, Great Britain and United States are prime examples. They were first maritime powers, and then they became great powers. So therefore, China has learned this lesson very well. जो मेरी thesis थी वो Chinese maritime power के ऊपर थी, and it wants to use its maritime power as part of its grand strategy. One of my books is also coming out on this, to establish bases across the world, to establish places from where resources can be taken out cheaply, to guarantee export markets for the resources, basically for economic prosperity, which then feeds into military prosperity. अभी जो मैं उनको दिखाऊंगा, उनका जो 2 ocean theory है, published in their Science of Military Strategy document publish करते हैं. Their aim is to dominate this area. Only the Atlantic is left out, and only the west coast of the US is left. ये उनकी published document है, that this is the area over which they have to establish their dominance for resource attraction, and for they said our land space is not enough now, this is what we want. And that is why the western part of it, the Belt and Road Initiative, that is a follow-up of this theory. It is all connected, and this is what they are actually putting into practice today. Current military balance vis-a-vis China, this is from open sources. I've compiled from 2-3 open sources. You can see that except for manpower and geography, China has the advantage today. And this is something that we need to be very conscious of, because hope is not a strategy. we have to be very clear that, we can't build a strategy on hope. It has to be on hard realities. First, we need to learn the hard realities, and then we need to move ahead with a strategy. If you look at the force level imbalance, you can see the kind of imbalance that is there. Of course, जो China के सारे जहाज हैं 350 या 400, all of them are not going to be deployed against India. But even if 10% are deployed against India, it equals our strength today. And therefore, we need to have much more collaboration with other countries, security collaboration, until we can build up our strength. And we need to pay dedicated attention to our maritime power if we are not to allow this imbalance to grow beyond a point. And these are the actual facts and figures available today. So in the end, I would just like to say that, India has all the attributes of becoming a global power. I am talking about 2050 because हम भी तब तक 100 साल हमारे इंडिपेंडेंस के हो जाएंगे to 2047. We would have been a republic for 100 years by 2050. But we require commensurate maritime power. उसमें first step is to have awareness. The fact that we have the most favorable geographical location, we have a glorious maritime history and tradition, and our destiny is inextricably linked to the seas. But there has been centuries of sea blindness. Unfortunately, for reasons I brought out before, we have been focused and remain focused even today because of the continental threats, the threat from China, threats from Pakistan, which are important. It's not that they are not important, but because of that, we are not able to focus adequately at sea on the maritime front. Over the past decade, the Honorable Prime Minister has made many important announcements. The Sagar concept, security and growth for all, the Sagarmala concept of infrastructure along India's coastline, the Indian Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which is very important, the Indo-Pacific concept itself, which is something that has put India at the center of not just the Indian Ocean but the Indo-Pacific as well. So our attention is gradually being brought back to the seas, but this needs to be translated into hard power, both military and commercial, through a holistic maritime strategy. And holistic maritime strategy means not just warships. It means all aspects of the maritime arena, merchant ships, fishing, infrastructure, etc. And China's signal ingress into the Indian Ocean is a warning signal for us to revitalize our maritime potential. There is, to my mind, no time to lose. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. I thank you for your patience, and I would be ready for any questions.